You hear those drums, you know what time it is. College football conversation coming your way. Another edition of Beef Up Front. Back-to-back monster weekends, monster college football Saturdays for us here on The Gambler. Of course, Beef himself, Ryan Beef Coyle. I'm Sean Brace. Beef, good afternoon, good evening. How we doing?
Looking forward to another big Saturday. I think you might have two better primetime games this week back to back, but last Saturday I think was a healthier kind of slate overall. But huge Saturday in the South with Texas and Georgia. Surprise! It's only their fifth time that they've ever played. The second since 1960. Played in the Sugar Bowl a few years ago. And then Alabama versus Tennessee. Alabama's won 17 of the last 18 matchups in this rivalry. So we'll talk about it a little bit more, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say the loser of this Tennessee Alabama game will not be in the college football playoff this year.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you, which is kind of making me sway one side a little bit more than the other. But on top of one team, I think is playing a little bit better football at this point in time. So we'll be breaking that one down. That's for dang sure. We got a lot to get to. We got some projections on ESPN that were just released. So I want to get your thoughts on that. We got to talk a little Heisman Trophy as Jane T is just continuing to tear things up. 2:35 in the morning, Beef. Were you still up watching Boise State in Hawaii? That's the question.
I was not. I started at 10:30 for a cornhole tournament Saturday morning, so I was asleep around midnight. Went home shortly after that Ohio State Oregon game.
Well, we had a bunch of upsets. Without going down the full list, I would say the big ones that I would like to hit with you going back real quick was Penn State over USC. James Franklin takes the team across the country, something that is not easy. It's in the trends. Teams that travel across two time zones heading into that game. I think it was like 2-8, 2-10, something like that. Now it's up to 4. I want to say 4-12 after last week, something crazy like that number, but it just is really tough to do so. So here we are. James Franklin stays undefeated with the win over USC in a pretty fun game in overtime, 33-30. Your thoughts from that?
Tyler Warren, man, that was some insane football that he performed. The tight end, H-back, whatever you want to call him, for Penn State. I had to watch that play, I think it was Sunday or Monday morning, like 15 times to fully comprehend, where he was basically lined up at left tackle, snapped the ball, ran a seam route all the way by himself. The quarterback throws it to Aller. Aller throws the 50-yard touchdown to him. It was one of the most bizarre college football plays I've ever seen, but 17 catches, over 200 receiving yards, just an unbelievable performance. And I think the thing with Penn State, we know that the defense in the rushing game was legit. I think Saturday was when you really saw Drew Aller step up and kind of become a man, take that next step as a college football quarterback, show that he can step up in these big games. And for Penn State to be able to come back in that one on the road, like you said, traveling to the West Coast for the first time since I saw it was 1992 was the first time that they haven't played in the Eastern or Central time zone besides in 2014 when they played over in Dublin, Ireland. They last did that in a regular season game in 1992 against BYU. So first time in a while. I wasn't even born yet. But for Penn State to be able to do that and come back and win the way that they did was very impressive. And I think that gave me a lot more confidence that they can win this game coming up in just a few weeks in Happy Valley against Ohio State.
Yeah, back on the 28th, I don't know who Penn State was playing. I tweeted 44 for Penn State might be my favorite player in college football.
I think it was an Illinois game.
Yeah, and he is so dynamic, but the numbers that he threw up in that game are just absurd. NFL, like what's going on there?
He came back. I think he's a senior, but I know he came back. I saw it. Like someone brought up the tweet he put out the other day from last year when he announced he was coming back and was like, could be the best decision of any player in the country to come back because he's the number one tight end kind of on the board. Him and Loveland from Michigan are the two kind of main guys, but he's just a football player. He's just a guy that I feel like screams like Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. Like he would love a player like that, can run the ball, little like Brock Bowers in him where you just line him up anywhere and he's going to make some plays. So he's been awesome and dynamic. Just kind of worry about the usage for him. Penn State's not great on the outside at the receiver spot. If he gets banged up, overused a little bit, that could be a big blow to that passing game.
No doubt about that. As I said, Penn State rolls on, big time win as far as that game was concerned. Then we kept it moving on Saturday to the Red River shootout, and Texas did all the shooting in that one. Kind of what we assumed. I think a lot of us were on the side of Oklahoma is a bad football team. Venables is really up against it at this point in time. Of course, going into the game, 17-point spread, the all-important equalizer, right? But I still think a lot of people were laying that number with the Longhorns. But no surprise, 34-3. Were you, I guess, surprised at the beat down, the 30-point victory, 31-point victory?
My take on that game was I actually took Oklahoma plus 3.5 in the first quarter just because we talked about it a bunch. Ewers coming back might have been a little bit rusty coming out of the gate, and Oklahoma gave them some problems, Texas on the ground last year. So I thought, who knows, with Michael Hawkins at quarterback, they could keep it interesting, which they did. They covered that first half number, but I just thought that the talent was too much at the end of the day, that Texas would just kind of impose their will over the second half, and they did just that. Coming into this season, though, that was one of my, you just brought up at the beginning, one of my biggest red flag question marks was, why the hell did Oklahoma give Venables a 6-year extension going into the year? I don't think he's done really anything to get that. And I had a few Oklahoma fans coming back on me on Twitter oh, we had to rebuild the roster. Now he has more security. No, once again, you're Oklahoma. You're expected to be competing for a playoff spot, for a national championship, I think, year in and year out. That's the expectation for you. Texas has surpassed you by far, your biggest rival. Now you're in the SEC. You're a 6th, 7th kind of in the pecking order at this point. So I think there's some major concern about this Oklahoma program going forward. And basically any progress that Lincoln Riley built up has been kind of lost in my eyes. The QB spot's a major mystery, and Texas, their biggest rival, has completely passed them and is, the number 1 team in the country. Here we are midway through the season, and you're losing that rivalry game by 30 plus. Major red flags in Norman for me.
All right. Well, like I said, I don't want to go over every game. We did have some awesome games at the end of the day, of course, with LSU and Ole Miss, and then the Tennessee and Florida game going to overtime. But we will hit on one more, and that was Ohio State and Oregon, 32-31. Everybody's going crazy over Dan Lanning's putting 12 men on the field, which, hey, look, it's creative. We've seen it happen before, matter of fact, in a Super Bowl. But, for people to know what to do in that position and to trade off, to go up against the clock, which is the most important deal. You got to give him the tip of the cap. He was ahead of the curve on that one. Still, Ohio State had an opportunity to at least get a field goal off. We know what took place there. Your thoughts on that game as Oregon prevails by 1 point?
I'm just kind of shooting myself in the foot with why that one and the LSU Ole Miss game. Why am I not taking, the highly ranked home team with the points? I picked both Ole Miss and Ohio State to cover those games on the road. It's kind of like a head scratcher for me. Why do that? Maybe learn our lesson a little bit going forward, but impressive by Oregon. I don't really think it discounts much of Ohio State. And I see a lot of people bashing them. And it's oh, Ryan Day can't win the big one. Is Will Howard really the guy? I thought Will Howard played really well in that game too. But I'm pretty sure if you ask 10 guys that cover college football closely, 8 or 9 would have said, we're going to have Oregon winning this game at home, and then they're going to rematch most likely in the Big Ten title game, and Ohio State gets revenge there. That is a tough environment to go into. I don't think it discounts anything that Ohio State does or can do going forward. But I think it gives you a little bit more kind of confidence, especially in Dylan Gabriel, because I know we talked about it on the Big Brain show last week where he's played kind of shaky to start, and he goes out, he has a really good game, throwing the ball down the field too. He's thrived off underneath and screens for so much of his career now. For him to go out there, make some big boy plays, some big boy throws, and for Dan Lanning to get a big win under his belt as well, confidence has to be sky high in Oregon right now.
Yeah, look, Dan Lanning, I think Mark Henry Jr. was saying it. It's on the airways as far as a promo is concerned that people wanted to make him the next big thing in college football coaching, and I think he's deserved it. Honestly, I do like his style, but the resume was lacking that big-time win, right? Mm-hmm. And now he can add that to the list. No matter how they got there, bottom line is they were able to edge out Ohio State in a huge win, and, of course, we know that that's going to have major – ramifications at the end of the season with the 12-team playoff. We will touch on the 12-team playoff in a little bit here because ESPN just released a college football playoff show, and I don't know if it was the official one or just one that they're doing here in week 6 or week 7, right? It's week 7. So I'm not
Going into
too
week
sure.
8.
Week 8, excuse me. Week 8.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
It's flying right by. You're not lying about that. So I'll get your thoughts on that. But let's get to the action because we got ourselves a lot of great games coming our way here on Friday and Saturday. First of all, on Friday, Oregon back in action, taking on Purdue 27.5. You got Oklahoma State and BYU. That's a 9.5 point spread. BYU still undefeated. And Oklahoma State could be in there for the running as far as an upset possibility in my mind. 9.5 is a lot of points. And Florida State and Duke 3-point favorites there. Anything for you on Friday, Beef, catching your attention?
I'm not pounding the table and say to definitely take this bet, but I'm definitely saying take a look at Purdue. We just talked about it. Oregon coming off one of the more exciting, thrilling wins of the year. Now you have to go on the road to Purdue. Weird things happen there. We've seen Ohio State go to there before and lose. And Purdue has struggled kind of out of the gate. They got their behinds beat a few weeks ago by Notre Dame, but they played a pretty good Illinois squad to the wire last week. They lost 50-49 in overtime. They might just start be playing better, quite frankly. And Oregon coming off a thrilling win. This is a typical kind of fall flat letdown spot. Reminds me a lot of a few weeks ago, Alabama in the Vandy game, to be quite frank. I'm not saying that Purdue's going to win this game, but it's a game that they could make things interesting and cover that number. Like you said, almost 4 touchdowns there. It's a typical fall flat spot. If they are able to kind of go out there and beat Purdue by 40 points, then you really look at Oregon and say, all right, this is a team that's legit, that they can do this. So Purdue's a game that I'm certainly looking at there at the plus 27.5. And I think Oklahoma State is just on the verge of just completely falling apart. I don't know if you saw the other day, but Gundy got kicked in the head by a cow. He had to move his press conference from in person to Zoom because of a head injury from a cow. Like, that's just the kind of year that's going on in Oklahoma State right now. A lot of expectations. They were my Big 12 champ going into the year, and they're a team that is really disappointed. BYU playing really well, sky high confidence. I think that they could win that game by double digits and cover that 9.5. So for Friday, those are the 2 plays and angles that I'll be looking at.
You know, Ollie Gordon's been a huge disappointment this year, and I don't know if it had much to do with the offseason and everything that he had going on. Of course, dealing with the issue as far as DUI is concerned. Or, hey, look, this is year 5 for him, I want to say, that maybe it's catching up to him, and we're looking at like a DeMarco Murray situation. I mean, I don't know. Like, oh, it's his junior year, so it's only, it's his 3rd year. Wow, it feels
Well, look
like
at all the
3rd year.
carries he got last year. I was saying
Correct.
this at the beginning of the year, like the tread on the tires. You have to think about it because he's got a good offensive line in front of him, a bunch of 4th and 5th year guys, and he was only averaging. I'm not sure what his average is now, but 3-4 games into the year, he was only averaging like 3.8 yards per carry for a dude that was as good as he was last year. You could think that the touches and the tread on the tires is catching up to him.
There's some terrible numbers. 101 carries, 384 yards, 4 touchdowns. His longest rush was 27 yards this season. He's averaging 3.8, as you said. Just a brutal year with the expectations through the roof for him and his squad. But I'll focus in on him more than anything because he was a phenomenal talent last year, and he is not living up to the hype at all. So that's easy to say now that we're halfway into the season. All right, let's go ahead and get to the card on Saturday. And we're going to open up with your boys, undefeated Miami. Last time we saw them, Michael Irvin was crawling around on all 4s in the midnight hour out there in Cal. But what an epic comeback it was to be able to score all those points, 24 points, whatever it was, to battle back and to come away with that victory against Cal. 5-point favorites here on the road against a pretty decent Louisville team, 4-2 on the season. And again, this game is kicking off at noon, so early kickoff for both teams. 61 is our total. What are you saying on this game, Beef?
I think Louisville's a live dog in this one. I had this game kind of highlighted after the Cal game. I was like, look at Louisville at home in this one for sure. Miami's been playing with their food a little bit too much. Need the win on the last play of the game against a Virginia Tech team that has been, I think you could put them right up there with Oklahoma State as one of the major underperformers so far. And then a Cal team that's probably going to be a team fighting for bowl eligibility. Miami hasn't really shown the ability to put these higher contending teams away from besides the Ball State and the other crap teams that they played in the non-conference. I think this could be definitely a spot where they take their first L if this Louisville team shows up and plays the way that they can. I definitely like them to cover at least because we've seen Miami play in these close games and haven't been able to really put teams away. So Miami maybe coming off a bye could be a little bit different, clean up some things, but I think they're playing with their food a little bit too much. I think Louisville's a live dog in this one.
Interesting. All right. Bigger opportunity for an upset. Clemson at home versus Virginia or Indiana at home versus Nebraska. Indiana 6.5-point favorites on DraftKings Sportsbook versus Nebraska. Nebraska 5-1, Indiana 6-0. Clemson at home against Virginia 21.5-point favorites, but Virginia sneaky 4-2 and might be up for the opportunity to go down to Death Valley and come away with maybe a cover 21.5. Your thoughts?
Virginia has definitely been one of the sneakier teams, I think, this year. But if you look at their schedule coming up, it's brutal. I think they end the year with 5 of their last 6 games are against teams that are currently ranked. And I think that over-under win total was 4.5. So there's a chance that even sitting here at 4-2, they might not hit that. I definitely would lean Nebraska if we're talking about an outright upset. I do think Virginia and the way that they play and their former head coach, or their head coach, Tony Elliott, former offensive coordinator at Clemson, so he kind of knows what goes on down there. You could look at it like that. But I think that Nebraska-Indiana game has potential to be one of the games of the day. I think it's a real close game. I think Nebraska could cover that, but I'm going to go Indiana to win. Matt Rule is now 2-20 straight up against ranked opponents, 0-4 at Nebraska. He's really struggled in close games, and for even the past decade or so now, Nebraska, just the school itself, has really struggled in close games. But they play a lot of close games. I think that they can make this like a 3-point game. Something wacky kind of happens at the end, and they find a way to lose per usual. But I do like Indiana to win that. But I think Nebraska can keep it close and cover.
Interesting. All right. Yeah, the Indiana-Nebraska game definitely has electricity all over it. So got to be tuning into that one on Saturday. I have to talk about Notre Dame because, look, they only have the one loss on the season so far. So their season is not cooked just yet. Got a game coming up against Georgia Tech. We've watched Georgia Tech a bunch this season, right? I feel like Georgia Tech is a tough team. Nice win last week against Duke or against UNC. The previous game against Duke. That's a tough Duke squad. And of course, we saw them open up the season with the win in Ireland against Florida State. Am I making this out to be a little bit easier here? I'm looking at the 12, and I don't think I could pass that up against Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think Georgia Tech could certainly keep it close. The main thing with Georgia Tech and the reason why I think they're attractive when you get a number above 10 with them, it's just the way that they play. They run the ball so much. They're such a run-heavy team. You look at Haynes King at the quarterback spot, he can run. Justice Haynes at running back, over 500 yards and 7 touchdowns. They can play kind of ball control offense and keep this a low-scoring game. I could see it being very similar to the way Georgia Tech played against Duke a couple weeks ago, like a 24-14 game where Notre Dame never really is able to extend the lead and Georgia Tech kind of hangs around. But Notre Dame is fighting a bunch of injuries. Mark will talk about it later, I'm sure, with us. But I know their best corner and one of the best corners in the country, Benjamin Morrison, just went out with a season-ending hip injury as well. So Georgia Tech, I think, that number might go up a little bit more just with the public kind of back in Notre Dame and coming off the beatdown that they had of Stanford last week. I think that number might get up a little bit more, and it would be more intriguing for me to take Georgia Tech just because the way that they play and run the football, I think that they could keep this game close. But Notre Dame's still in position to make the playoff. They can't let games like this slip away because they still have 2 games against undefeated Army and Navy on the schedule. Like, they win those games, that resume is just going to continue to look better and better. And you wouldn't have thought to say that at the beginning of the year.
Interesting. All right, let's go ahead and get into the 3:30 window. And I want to talk, well, Notre Dame and Georgia Tech is at 3:30, excuse me. But we're going to hit on Alabama and Tennessee. And then I'm going to ask you about 2 games that feature teams that are in a bounce back spot coming off of a tough loss. And I think I can make the case either way for 4 teams in those 2 games. But let's talk about Alabama and Tennessee. And 2 teams that I think are going in slightly different directions. Alabama was lackluster last week against South Carolina. There's no denying it, but they still found a way to win a football game. Tennessee is just underperforming across the board. I know that they won last week. I thought that they were lucky. It has just been, it hasn't been the smoothest situation down there as far as Tennessee is concerned. I thought that they would be slinging it. I thought the offense would be up a little bit more wide open for Nico. He doesn't seem to be the calmest at this point in time.
Mhm.
But play calling seems to be an issue. And guess what, Beef? They're getting the running game. Like they still are
Yeah.
getting a rushing attack. So that was one of the reasons why I believed in Tennessee more than anything this year, is because I thought they weren't one-dimensional. So if it wasn't working with Nico and he's a young quarterback, he needs time, they're going to have the run game to fall back on. But it's been ugly. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are at Tennessee right now and in this game with Alabama, a 3-point road favorite, 56.5.
I think when you look at this game, it's two units that are kind of really being the Achilles heel of this team. When you look at Tennessee and the offense, you never would have thought to say that before. And then it's weird to say, but they get a chance to play an Alabama defense that has really been struggling. Like you don't think when, at least under Heupel, that Tennessee is going to struggle on offense, and you never think Alabama is going to struggle on the defensive side. So it's kind of which unit is more broken right now. I'm really concerned about the regression I think that we've seen out of Nico over these past few games since that Kent State game, which was an absolute blowout, 71-0. I mean, even the Kent State game, they weren't throwing the ball in the second half. He wasn't even playing much, but he hasn't gone over 200 yards in the Oklahoma game, the Arkansas game, the Florida game. Only had 25 points against Oklahoma, only had 14 against Arkansas, and then 23 against Florida. And two of those touchdowns that they had were on short fields because of Florida's turnovers. It's really mind-boggling to see them struggle to move the ball like this. So you just kind of got to think, like, are they able to get going against Alabama? And is that what I want to bet on? I feel like I was a major hypocrite last week coming on here and taking the two road teams in the Ole Miss and Ohio State. So I'm not going to go against one of my biggest logics in betting college football, that home field advantage matters. If I'm getting some points here with Tennessee, I'm going to take them, and I'm going to bank on them kind of being able to figure it out against this Bama defense that can't really cover much right now. So I'm going to go with Tennessee here at home. It's not a supremely confident pick. I'm not sticking my flag in it like I will in the Texas-Georgia game down the line, but I'm going to take the home team getting the points here and bank on the offense being able to figure it out. I think we have a large enough sample size with Heupel compared to these Kalen DeBoer defenses.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to go ahead and plant my flag like Baker Mayfield in the Red River Shootout, all right? Right in the midfield. No, I think that Alabama is going to come away with this dub simply because in the big picture, I still see Alabama competing, and this isn't much of a handicap. Like I still put them on one of those on the scales of some of the better teams out there. Obviously, Georgia, we still think of it in that light. We know what took place in that game. Tennessee just has come up short, come up small this season. And I know Nico is young. He's got a long way to go. Maybe I was too fast to anoint him the number one overall pick in next year's draft, whatever it may be. But 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, a little over 1,000 yards. It just hasn't been easy for them down there in Tennessee. And I just don't expect them to snap of the fingers and make it happen here. So going to be a good game. Won't be shocked if you come out on top, if Tennessee finds a way to win a home game. But I'll roll the dice. It's a small enough number. I'll say that Alabama goes down there and keeps their season alive, or at least the pursuit of a playoff appearance alive. Because like you said, whoever loses this game, they're cooked.
Yeah, at least in terms of making it to the SEC title game or getting that one of those top 4 seeds from the SEC. They're still going to have a chance if they win out to go 10-2, and I think have a pretty good chance to make it. But you look at the losses, like Alabama to Vanderbilt. Who knows what Vanderbilt ends up at this point? Like, I don't think you can discount them maybe being like an 8-win team and what they did, because I thought that was a equally impressive win last week after the Kentucky game after the Alabama game finding a way to beat Kentucky. And when you look at Tennessee, like I think Arkansas could sneakily be like an 8-win team, but I think Tennessee still might have Georgia down the line. Don't hold me to that. But 2 years ago, this was probably one of my top 5 college football games ever watched. That 52-49 win by Tennessee against Alabama. If we get half a game of that, we're in for a really good one on Saturday afternoon.
Wouldn't shock me if that is the case. And yeah, they got at Georgia 11-16. So November 16th. So they go Bama, Kentucky, No, they have a week off between Bama and Kentucky, so they're off, and then they go Mississippi State at home, and then at Georgia. Then they get UTEP at home, and then they close up
with
at
Vandy.
Vandy.
Yeah, so like you at the beginning of the year, you thought you're at least sweeping those two at the end with UTEP and Vandy, and you probably had the Arkansas game penciled in as a win as well. So it really comes down to you got to split between Alabama and Georgia most likely to feel safe. I would say going into Selection Sunday, and safe is a pretty generous word considering what some of the other teams have done, and teams just not losing games. It's going to be crazy come these last few weeks of the season.
All right, give me 60 seconds on this one. Who's bouncing back in a bigger way? You got USC and Maryland, 4 p.m. USC on the road. They're 7-point favorites here. And then you got Michigan. Last time we saw them, they lost to Washington. They're back in action, 3:30 on the road in Illinois, and they're 3-point favorites.
I'm going to say USC is more of in jeopardy of losing that game. After losing the way that they did to Penn State, now having to travel all the way across country. Did you say that's a noon game as well?
4.
Okay. That kind of helps them out a little bit because that's a 1 o'clock. Because I was going to say a noon Eastern in Maryland. That's a 9 a.m. body clock kick for USC. But I think Michigan it comes out of this bye week with a little bit more of a balanced attack. I think Jack Tuttle is the best guy for just being able to simply complete the forward pass and give them some type of balance on the offensive side. Illinois last week led up 49 points to Purdue that we talked about earlier, who's really struggled this year. So I'm gonna bank on Michigan kind of coming out and being able to have a little bit more of a balanced attack, a full week of practice with Tuttle. And I think USC has some real trouble flying West Coast to East Coast. Fits that kind of 2 time zone narrative that we've been talking about, even though Maryland's coming off a blowout loss to Northwestern. Just a weird college football spot there.
All right, Beef. Let's talk about Dion and Colorado. They are on the road against Arizona, 4 o'clock spot here. They're 3.5-point dogs, 57.5. The thing about Colorado, I fear, is the snowball factor. I know they're getting Travis Hunter back, Jimmy Horn back. I just feel like this is another spot that possibly could get ugly for them and have to dig out of a hole in the second half, which they're very capable of. But I think I'm going to back the home Arizona Wildcats in this one. Your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I like Arizona here too as well. I think that was a good fight that Colorado put up last week. There was 2 games I lost by the hook. I had Penn State -3.5 and K-State -3.5. Both of them won by 3. It's also though like what Arizona team shows up. We've seen Arizona look really good in a few games this year, and then we've seen them lay some eggs. But 5, I think the over is probably my favorite play in this one. 5 of Colorado's last 6 games have gone over the total in conference play. But Colorado, I think our biggest thing with them from the offseason, they can look really good in spurts, 3 to 4 game stretch. But once the depth starts getting tested, who knows, with a shoulder injury to Travis, how long does he play, especially going both sides of the ball? That's something that you can't hide. You're either getting hit every time when you're getting like press coverage, or you got to go make a tackle. The shoulder injury could be something that he's out of the game by the end of the first quarter. So I do like Arizona, and I think that this game could see a lot of points in it as well.
All right. Yeah. To me, I just look at this spot for Arizona and I say it's probably the biggest game that they're going to have on their schedule from here on out. Right. And it's at home. So maybe we'll probably a rivalry game against Arizona State, but Colorado coming to town is the big damn deal. So I think Arizona, and that number is 3.5, maybe a little bit too many in their favor. Like you said, Colorado putting up a little bit of a fight there. So I think that's kind of telling. I'll back Arizona on this one on Saturday. All right, let's get to the big one. You want to plant that flag? I want to see it. Wave it. Which way you waving your flag here, Ryan Beef Coyle? Georgia and Texas, 7:30 kickoff. Texas 3.5-point favorites at home. 56 is our total. Kirby Smart as an underdog. Don't see it often, and you probably don't want to see it. So I'm curious, where are you going in this one? Texas and Georgia.
Here's my stat on this game before I get into my pick. If Georgia loses on Saturday night, it will be the first loss against a team not named Alabama since November 7th of 2020 against Florida. That will be 1,442 days between that last regular season loss against a team not named Alabama, which is it's just insane. It's been a remarkable run, but I'm gonna go hook 'em. And the closer we get to this game, the more I think it could be the dog walking of the week. I think
Ooh.
Texas has a chance to run Georgia out of the building on Saturday night. I don't care about the 3.5. I think that they could win this game by a touchdown. I think they could win this game by double digits. I think top to bottom, you look at the roster, Texas is more like Georgia was these past few years. They're deep at every single position. They have one guy go out, you have the next guy step up. Georgia just does not have the dudes that they've had before. I think the quarterback spot with Quinn Ewers at home, much more composed. I feel like Georgia and Carson Beck feels like so erratic at times. Like last week, even against Mississippi State, he put up great numbers, but they were in a pretty, tight battle against Mississippi State. That was at least a game. Georgia also 1-5 against the spread this year, have really struggled. And Texas at home, the work that Sark has done and transforming his career and just becoming an offensive mastermind, really, I think he's going to give this Georgia defense troubles. That's definitely the worst defense of this kind of dominant era of Georgia football. And my take on Georgia coming into this year, their 3 toughest games on the road: Alabama, Texas, Ole Miss. I say they would lose 2 of those 3. I feel a lot more confident that they'll beat Ole Miss at the end of the season. I'm going to ride with my take that Texas wins this game over Georgia. And Georgia has some real questions if they're even going to be a playoff team by the end of the year. They can't just rely on that brand, I think, in the name Georgia. I think the play eventually has to show up on the field, and I don't think they've been one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the country this year.
Couldn't agree more with you. And, I'm not going to sit up here and say that, oh, it's any given Saturday and Georgia's got to fight for everything. And they could go, like, look, just trust your eyes. And Texas has balled this year. And I think to your point, it's like next man up. They had running back issues. Of course, Quinn goes down. Arch steps in. Didn't play against great competition, but still got the job done. And those games were never even in question. So we've seen Georgia struggle at times. Kentucky, they got the loss. That's well documented against Alabama. For me, Texas going into Michigan solidified everything I needed to know, and they manhandled them. And then it's not a fluke. We saw what they did yesterday or over the weekend against Oklahoma. And, oh, by the way, Mississippi State isn't that bad of a team. Then they just played Georgia. I think Georgia was a 20-plus favorite, and they only won by 10.
I think they were 30.
Yeah, even bigger than that. So, Again, you could make the case for Georgia. I'm not going to yell at you if somebody wanted to say, I'm going to back Kirby and they're because like anything can happen from the standpoint of look what happened in that Alabama game when clearly one team was ready to go. What if Texas comes out flat and Georgia has that vibe going for them where it's like, oh, you want to doubt us? They got ball players over there. They got some of the best in the country, no doubt. But at the end of the full game, 4 quarters played, as long as there's nothing crazy as far as Ewers turning it over, which I don't expect him to do, but I'll put my hard-earned money on Texas, so anything's possible. I'm going to back you with the horns here as well. I love the play. So we agree on that one, but Alabama we're going up against.
Yep. Right. I need Tennessee to win. I got that game in 2 weeks. I want them to be as highly ranked as possible.
Beef, no matter what. It's going to be live down there, brother. It's going to be live. All right, man, from New Orleans to Tennessee, you've been all over this damn planet. Look at you. Let's go. All right, we'll close up shop with some quick hitters here as always. Let's hit the fast forward button and take me to the evening hour, and I'm going to give you 3 to choose from if we're chasing. You get Colorado State Air Force at 8. Colorado State 7-point favorites on the road at Air Force. UNLV 7-point favorites on the road at Oregon State. That's a 10 p.m. kick. TCU and Utah 4.5-point favorites against TCU at home, 10:30 kick. Where are we chasing?
I'll go UNLV -7. They haven't covered the spread the last 2 weeks. I don't know how they didn't cover last week. They were up like 40-7 on Utah State when I went to bed. That was a killer to see them not cover. And the week before, crazy game against Syracuse. But if you go back over the past 2 years now, UNLV is the second best team in the country against the spread. The data's there to back up this team, and this is a really bad Oregon State team this year. So I'll go UNLV -7. And just have the data on my side in that one. That offense has looked great and hasn't missed a beat. And that Boise State game coming up, I think it might be even next week. Is going to be a really, really fun one.
All right, and we'll end up on this one. Coin flip me. You ready? Little coin flip action. We're gonna stay in the backyard. Tulsa and Temple 2.5. Temple 2.5-point favorites, and then Florida and Kentucky point. Kentucky a point favorite. Coin flip. Which way is it going to Tulsa and Temple?
I'm gonna go with the Owls. It's a homecoming game for Temple, and I feel like that's one of those games that it's your best chance to get a win probably the rest of the season. So balls to the wall type game for the Owls. They've been playing a little bit better as of recently. Haven't been shown in the win column, but been playing some respectable ball at least.
All right, and then Florida, Kentucky.
Oh, that is an ugly one. I'm gonna go with Florida.
Wow.
You hate to see players get hurt, but Graham Mertz goes down with a torn ACL. You're going to finally get to see DJ Lagway now a quarterback the rest of the year. And that is the one potential thing that if Billy Napier has any % chance of saving his job, it's DJ Lagway going out there playing well and getting them a few wins, getting them to 6-6 or something like that. He can maybe look at administration and be like, this is the guy. He's my guy. He's staying here. Give us one more chance to kind of run it back. So give me Florida in that one. Florida has low-key been playing a little bit better too. Real good fight against Tennessee. Yep. Beat up on a pretty solid UCF squad a couple weeks ago. So who knows? Maybe they're playing a little bit better. And Kentucky seems like they're in a little bit of disarray.
Ryan Beef Coyle can be found on all things socials at Ryan Coyle 35. Make sure you're following along at Beef up front. The gang doing big things. Well, we got McClay holding it down in studio by himself, man. Are you kidding me? Let's go. Running the rocket ship from the inside, McClay. Beef, what's on tap this weekend? Where are you enjoying the games?
I think I might be down in Manayunk this weekend, actually. So a little bit of a change of the pace. Been a long last couple weekends, so a little afternoon delight on Saturday, and then we'll be on a stool somewhere for Tennessee, Alabama. That's for sure.
That's what I'm talking about. All right. Well, hopefully wherever you're at brings you luck. Always a pleasure, sir. Good luck on all of those plays. Once again, if you missed anything, you can find all of our podcasts once again at foxbhlgambler.com.